Did you know there's a legend of a city swallowed by the sea, not in war or fire, but in sorrow? A place where, they say, you can still hear church bells ringing beneath the waves. Welcome back to Mysteries of Old, where forgotten echoes shape the tales we tell. Tonight, we drift through salt air and mist to a coastline etched with memory, and into the legend of Ys, the city that defied the sea and lost. Long before Paris was a dream, and before the cathedrals of Europe reached for heaven, there was a king named Gradlin. He ruled Cornwall, a coastal kingdom in what is now Brittany, France. The people knew him as silent and sure, a man who listened more than he spoke. His eyes were blue as stormy tides, his hands calloused by oar and sword. They said he had once sailed so far west that the stars changed, and that he returned not with riches, but with a newborn daughter. Her name was Dahat. No one knew who Dahat's mother was. Some said she was a woman from a sunken island, others said she was a Selkie, one of the sea folk. Whatever the truth, the sea never left Dahat. As a child, she stood at the water's edge for hours, watching the waves roll in like secrets whispered in another language. When she laughed, the gulls turned. When she cried, the tide rose. King Gradlin loved her more than he loved the land or the church. She was his joy and his sorrow, his prayer and his sin. To please her, he promised a gift, a city unlike any other, a place of beauty and wonder, of art and freedom, a city that would rise not on a hill or plain, but at the edge of the world, lower than the sea itself. He called it Ys. They said the engineers wept when they first saw the plans. Walls thicker than trees were to hold back the sea, with great dikes that wrapped around the city like the arms of a god. A massive silver gate would open and close with the tides, governed by a single key. That key would never leave the king's neck. This was the price of daring the sea, constant vigilance. And so Ys was born, not grown like other cities, but summoned into being with ambition and pride. Stone by stone, tower by tower, it rose from the sand like something dreamed by poets and built by saints. Its streets were paved in polished marble, veined with green and violet. Canals laced between courtyards and homes. At night, glass lanterns lit the bridges like stars fallen to earth. The people who came to live in Ys were artists, scholars, dancers, and dreamers. They built libraries shaped like conch shells, temples with vaulted ceilings painted like constellations. They wore silk and gold and spoke in riddles and rhyme. Music echoed through the city's stone corridors morning to dusk. Here, it was said, the soul could breathe. And above them all was Dahat. She grew into a woman of impossible beauty, hair black as kelp, skin kissed with moonlight, eyes that glowed with secrets. She walked barefoot even in winter and spoke to the waves as if they were family. Her voice could hush crowds. Her laughter could cause men to forget their prayers. Unlike her father, Dahat did not fear the sea. She danced on the sea walls, let waves lick her feet, sang songs that echoed off the cliffs. Some said she was building a kind of church of her own, one that worshipped wind and salt and freedom. She hosted festivals with masks and bonfires that lasted for days. Guests would come from across the continent to drink her wine, wear her colors, and forget their old names. But for all its beauty, Ys was a city straining against the tide, not just of water, but of time. Old priests in crumbling robes warned Gradlin of prophecy. They said the sea would take back what man had stolen, that no wall, no matter how tall or thick, could outlast pride. But Gradlin was a king, and kings do not yield to omens, especially when their daughter is smiling. And so the days passed. Ys grew louder, wilder, massed balls blurred into each other. The dikes groaned in the night like weary giants. Merchants whispered of strange things, fish found dead with eyes like candles, tides that shifted without warning. And still the music played, still the wine flowed, still the key lay heavy on the king's chest. One spring, when the fog hung low and even the birds flew silently, a figure arrived. He came from the west, cloaked in salt gray and shadow. He walked with no escort, spoke with no name. But when he entered Dahat's court, every torch flickered. He bowed only to her. No one remembered inviting him. No one could recall where he sat, but he was always near Dahat, whispering, listening, vanishing. Some said his eyes were the color of storm surge. Others swore he had no eyes at all, only mirrors. She called him Moor. In the old tongue, it meant sea. They danced each night, alone in empty halls. She spoke to him in languages she had never learned. Her hair trailed behind her like ink in water. He never touched food, never cast a shadow. But he smiled, and she smiled back. "Do you love me?" He asked one night as the moon hovered low. "I do," she said. "Then give me the key." She hesitated. "My father." "Your father fears the sea, but you are the sea." And she believed him. That night, Dahat moved through the palace like a ghost. She entered the king's chambers while he dreamed of old voyages and forgotten wars. She knelt beside him, fingers trembling. The chain was cold, the key heavier than she imagined. She took it. Far below, the dikes moaned. Out on the shore, the waves pulled back from the rocks. And somewhere in the dark, Moor waited. When morning broke over A's, the sky was the color of bruised silver. Clouds hung low, and the sea was unnaturally still, as if holding its breath. In the city, no one noticed the shift. Musicians tuned their lutes. Merchants opened velvet-lined stalls. Children chased gulls down the marble walkways. Life danced forward, oblivious to what Dahat had done. But in the deepest corridors of the king's palace, the key was gone. King Gradlin awoke with a hand to his chest and a whisper in his mind. He staggered from bed, heart thunderous, breath shallow. When he found the chain broken, he did not shout. He did not pray. He merely walked to the balcony and stared at the sea. Below, the tide was wrong. The dikes were groaning now, louder than before. It was not the voice of metal under strain. It was something older, a sound like teeth grinding in stone. At the great gate, no guards stood watch. Dahat had dismissed them hours earlier with laughter and wine. Now only silence remained. The key was in her hand. She stood at the edge of the water, wind curling through her cloak, eyes wide with anticipation. The stranger, Moor, was nowhere to be seen, but she felt him, felt the promise. She held the key aloft as though an offering. The sea responded. With a roar that split the morning in half, the tide surged. It struck the gate not like water, but like fury. Metal screeched, stone cracked. The silver gate, once the city's salvation, gave way with a shudder, and then the ocean entered ice. Not in ripples, not in waves, but in a wall. A surge so vast and sudden it swallowed streets, plazas, and palaces in seconds. Boats were lifted into the air like toys. Marble towers crumbled like crusts of bread. The canals overflowed, then vanished, consumed by a force that had waited too long. People screamed, ran, fell. Some called to saints. Others leapt into the rising water, hoping to swim. But there was no swimming, only the flood. King Gradlin did not run. He called for his horse and rode through the chaos, eyes scanning for Dahat. Fires burst from windows. Statues toppled. Bells rang, not from churches, but from panic, and still the water rose. He found her at the cathedral steps, soaked and still. The key clutched in her fist, her face pale. She looked at him with something like sorrow. Or was it triumph? "What have you done?" he asked. She did not answer. He pulled her onto the horse, spurred it toward the city's only bridge. Behind them, these fell. A city built in defiance of the sea was now dragged back into it, stone by stone, soul by soul. As they rode, a voice rang through the thunder. It came from the sky, from the sea, from the bones of the earth. "Cast her off, or you both shall drown." It was not a voice one questioned. Gradlin turned to his daughter. Her eyes were wide, terrified, human. "Forgive me," he said, and let her go. She fell silently into the water, arms open like wings. The tide paused. The horse climbed the last slope, and ease was gone. For a long time, the waves said nothing. Days passed, then weeks, and the sea near Douarnenez Bay remained calm, almost reverent. Fishermen avoided it. Sailors whispered prayers when passing. The sun set heavy and red on the water as if mourning something beneath. Is had vanished, but the memory clung to the air like salt. Those who had escaped told conflicting stories. Some swore the city had never existed. Others described its towers in perfect haunted detail. A few wandered the coast, murmuring of submerged gardens and ghostly songs. What they all agreed on was this: Dahut had doomed them. But not all agreed she had done so alone. Some claimed the man she called Moore had returned to the sea transformed into a wave or a shadow or nothing at all. Others whispered that he had been the devil, come to claim a proud city in exchange for a kiss. And yet others, old women who stared too long into tide pools, said he was the sea itself, hungry, patient, unforgiving. King Gradlon never returned to Ace. He rode inland, up steep trails and through grieving villages, until he reached Quimper, a place of pine trees and clean rivers. He did not speak of what had happened. He placed the broken chain and the useless key on the altar of a chapel and never ruled again. His beard grew white, his eyes hollow. He walked as one half drowned. But his people remembered. They carved warnings in the stone. Do not build below the tide. Do not love the sea too deeply. They sang songs to children about Dahut the witch princess, who danced on seawalls and brought ruin with a smile. And in the space where Ys had stood, the sea grew deeper, darker. Strange lights were said to flicker beneath the surface on moonless nights. Nets sometimes returned torn, as if scraped against invisible rooftops. Some say Dahut became a mermaid, that she still swims near the wreckage, her hair flowing behind her like ink, singing to fishermen in the fog. Others believe she waits, not for rescue, but for remembrance. That as long as people speak of Aes, it is not truly gone, and speak they did. The story spread beyond Brittany, across France, across Europe, changing shape like driftwood. In one version, Dahut is a villain. In another, a victim. In still others, a goddess whose love destroyed a kingdom. Poets wrote of her. Painters tried to capture her face, always failing. Priests warned of her, and sailors. Sailors simply left an offering before launching, a coin tossed to the tide, a whispered prayer in the old tongue. Let me pass. I am not of Ys. And then, centuries later, something strange happened. A storm churned over the bay for days. Wind screamed through the cliffs, and waves pounded the shore with fists of foam. When it cleared, the beach was scattered with debris, seaweed, shattered wood, and a bell. Half buried in sand, green with age, etched in a script no scholar could place. Locals gathered around it. Some claimed to hear it ring when no one touched it. Others felt ill standing near it, as if time pulled differently there. The bell was taken to the nearest church, but it cracked on the journey. By nightfall, it had disappeared. Since then, other things have surfaced. Tiles shaped like fish scales, statues worn smooth by currents. A single shoe impossibly preserved. Divers report sensations of being watched. Cameras fail beneath certain depths. One expedition claimed to glimpse an entire street intact lined with sea-encrusted buildings. But when they resurfaced, they had no footage, only silence. The church bells of Ys, they say, still ring beneath the waves. Some believe they toll on the anniversary of the city's fall. Others claim they warn of coming storms. But all agree the sound is real and haunting. A musician once tried to replicate it. He spent months tuning bronze and copper, layering recordings of tides and wind. But when he played the final composition in a cathedral, An entire row of candles blew out. No doors had opened. No windows moved. He left the cathedral and never played again. The sea remembers what we try to forget. It holds our arrogance, our grief, our beauty. Ease is gone, and yet it lingers just out of reach, just beneath the surface. Somewhere under that water, towers still rise, gates still rust, and perhaps a girl with black hair still sings to the bones of a city. Centuries passed. Maps were redrawn, borders shifted, and languages changed. But along the western edge of France, near Douarnenez Bay, the same stories continued. Not just in legend, but in lullabies, in paintings. In warnings scratched onto harbor stones, the fishermen told their sons to never mock the sea. The grandmothers poured fresh water into the waves before each journey. And the bell, though no one had seen it in decades, was still spoken of as if it could surface again at any moment. In 1846, a scholar from Rennes named Élie Caradec arrived in Brittany. He was fascinated by folklore, especially stories that refused to die. When he heard of ease, he was skeptical. Surely, he wrote, these tales are symbolic, at best, metaphors. At worst, exaggerations from a drunken age. But still he listened. He spent weeks interviewing locals. He copied down hymns sung by candlelight. He visited cliffs where fishermen claimed to have seen lights beneath the surf. And he heard the same refrain over and over. The city is still there. The bells still ring. Then, in a small village tavern on the coast, he met an old woman named Maëlle. Her hair was the color of snowmelt, her eyes a misty gray. She spoke slowly, as if weighing every word against a forgotten tide. She told him a different version of the tale. In Maëlle's story, Dehout was not evil. She was curious, lonely, raised in a palace of stone and music, but denied the world outside. Her mother had died young, and her father, King Gradlin, was more shadow than man, often at prayer or sailing far from the city. The sea was Dehout's only constant. It roared beyond the walls like a living thing. She would watch it for hours, listening to the rhythms, whispering secrets to the waves. When the man called more arrived, he brought with him not evil but stories of other lands, other gods, other ways to live. He spoke of tides as language, storms as emotion. He told her the gate kept not the sea out, but the city in. And she began to believe him. Is that so wrong? Maëlle asked Caradec. To want more than a gilded cage? The scholar had no answer. He returned to Rennes and published a book titled Eyes, the City Remembered. It was dismissed by academics, but quietly passed between hands in coastal towns. Caradec died 2 years later. Some say a wave took him while walking the shore. Others say he vanished without a trace, but the book endured. And so did the sightings. In 1903, a lighthouse keeper claimed to see a row of rooftops shimmering beneath the bay at dawn. He described them as too symmetrical to be reef, too ornate to be chance. His account was ignored. In 1937, a woman sketching landscapes near the cliff's edge drew what she saw in the waves: arches, pillars, a statue of a woman with flowing hair, arms raised in warning or welcome. When she showed the drawing to locals, they refused to look. One man wept. And in 1979, a deep-sea exploration vessel recorded a brief sonar anomaly, a rectangular structure buried in silt, exactly where Ease was said to have stood. The tape was mysteriously lost in a fire weeks later. Through it all, the bells tolled. On stormy nights, their chime carried through the mist. Some say the sound is sad, others say it's beautiful, but all who hear it say the same thing. It feels like remembering something you never lived. The memory of A's never truly left the tides. In small churches with cracked stone floors, candles are still lit for Dehout, not as a warning, but as a daughter lost. Her story, retold again and again, has softened over time. In some versions now, she was a seer. In others, she still dreams beneath the waves, her breath the rhythm of the tide. Folklorists argue over these versions. Is it myth or memory? Is ease a symbol of human pride or of misunderstood love? But in Brittany, no one debates. To them, the sea holds truths that books never will. Every generation has its sighting. In the spring of 1988, a group of scuba trainees explored the coastal shelf near Douarnenez. Visibility was low, the light murky, but one diver, a girl named Elodie, surfaced early, her face pale, trembling. She couldn't speak for hours. Later, she described it in a whisper. Streets paved with stone. A statue of a woman with eyes closed. Music she could not explain. She never dove again. Elodie moved inland and became a librarian, far from the sea's pull. But in the margin of a book she once lent a student, a note was found. She is still down there, singing. The sea has always held more than salt and shipwrecks. Beneath its surface are histories we refuse to remember, and promises whispered in storms. It is both tomb and cradle. For the people of Brittany, the sea is family, feared, adored, obeyed, and Eyes, whether real or not, is part of that lineage. A place both gone and eternal. In 2004, during restoration of an old chapel near the cliffs, workers discovered a mosaic beneath the floorboards. It showed a city with high walls and towers, a crescent moon above it. But curiously, it was not underwater. Instead, the sea loomed behind it, as if waiting. There was no record of who created the mosaic, no date. But in its corner, written in faded Latin, ad mar redebit, she will return to the sea. Scholars dismissed it as apocalyptic symbolism, but locals were less sure. In the years that followed, strange things began to happen. Tourists reported lights far out on calm nights, not boats, not stars. A fisherman claimed to have caught a silverfish with runes etched on its scales. He let it go, and a boy just 7 years old woke from a dream he could not explain. He told his mother he had walked in a city beneath the water, that people there had gills and glowing eyes, that one of them knew his name. He had never heard of Eyes. Not long after, a new musical piece surfaced online, no name, no credits. It featured what sounded like chimes and water and voices beneath both. It went viral for its eerie beauty. Those who listened claimed strange dreams, of sea gardens, of gates opening, of a girl whose eyes changed with the tide. No one knows who uploaded it, and still the bells toll. Old men in cafes near the port insist they heard them just last week. 3 soft chimes, then silence. A fisherman once recorded it on tape, but when he played it back, all he heard was static. His dog refused to come near the recorder again. Perhaps Eyes does not wish to be captured, only remembered. In the archives of Paris, buried in a neglected folio, a Breton monk's journal from the 14th century speaks of a recurring dream. The monk, Brother Aldrich, describes waking with wet hair and sand in his bed, though he lived far from the coast. In his dream, he walked on cobbled roads underwater, passing windows lit from within. He spoke to no one, but always heard singing. A woman in a red cloak, he wrote, stands at the threshold of a cathedral with a silver door. Her eyes are green as kelp. She watches me, but does not speak. It would be easy to dismiss this as the product of loneliness or madness, except that his journal was not the only one. Centuries earlier, a Viking saga described a drowned kingdom to the south, with gates that hum like whale song. A sailor from Andalusia claimed in 1117 to have seen rooftops glinting under clear waters off the Breton coast. A map from 1502 labels a part of the Atlantic simply, Is Perdida. Historians call these coincidences, patterns made by humans desperate for meaning. Short pause, but those who live by the sea, who listen to it daily, know better. They say stories are waves, they return again and again. And sometimes stories bleed. In 2010, a woman walking her dog along the cliffs near Plaha found something strange. A stone, half buried, carved with a crescent and what looked like music notes. The markings didn't match any known script, and when she returned the next day, the stone was gone. She hadn't moved it. In Brittany, no one laughed. They only nodded. Children in fishing villages are still taught to never wear silver near the tide and never whisper your name into the wind. Lest she hear you, they say, that she is never named, but everyone knows. The legends are not confined to Brittany alone. In Cornwall, across the sea, there are tales of a ghostly city heard during storms. The Cornish call it Lioness, a land swallowed for its arrogance. In Ireland, it's Tectuin, a place of souls and waves. In each tale, a city, a sin, and a punishment. Could these be the same story? One city told differently with each tongue? Or do we carry some deep shared memory of a place we lost and cannot stop imagining? Back in Brittany, a new generation of artists, musicians, and storytellers have embraced ease, not just as a myth, but as heritage. Murals of Dahut now adorn alley walls in Quimper. An opera called The Gates of the Sea premiered in Nankas, telling her story with fog machines and electric violins. And a popular podcast, Voices Beneath, interviews locals who claim sightings. A retired school teacher recalled the time she found a key on the shore, silver, ornate, cold even in sunlight. She turned it into police. It was never claimed. Another man described losing time near the bay. He had gone to sketch the cliffs, and when he looked up, hours had passed. His watch had stopped. On his sketch pad, he found a drawing he swears he didn't make. A domed tower with open windows and waves curling around it like arms. These are not fabrications for attention. In most cases, the people never told anyone until asked. Some folklorists suggest these stories are a form of cultural trauma. The sea, after all, has taken so much. Boats, sons, whole livelihoods. Maybe ease is the name people give that grief. Maybe Dahut is just a face for what can't be controlled. But others argue the opposite. That ease is a warning, not just of pride, but of forgetting. That when a people forget who they were or deny their roots, the sea takes something in return. The waters off Brittany are being studied now for tidal energy. New turbines will be anchored near the very place ice was said to sink. Some protest, claiming the turbines will stir up things best left buried. The government says there's nothing to worry about. And yet, in the past year, the fishermen near Douarnenez have caught strange things. Fish with translucent skin. Bones too smooth to be from any known creature. A net once came up tangled with seaweed that shimmered gold in the moonlight. An old man named Matthew, whose family has fished these waters for generations, says the sea feels heavier lately. Like something's turning in its sleep, he said. When asked what he meant, he only shrugged. Sometimes words are too small for what the sea remembers. And sometimes the bells toll at dawn. Not all stories end. Some simply drift, and ice, they say, is still drifting. Beneath tides that rise and fall with the breath of time, it waits, not for rescue nor judgment, but perhaps for memory. The cathedral beneath the waves is said to be intact. Its glass windows no longer colored, but glinting with salt and coral. Statues lean slightly now, tilted as if bowing to the pressure of centuries. Algae traces along pews where once nobles knelt. And somewhere, in a cloistered chamber carved of stone, a throne sits empty, but not unoccupied. For some believe Dahut still walks there, that she was never lost, only transformed, a queen in exile. Her skin no longer soft, but scaled, her eyes vast as the deep. She walks the drowned halls and sings to the fish, and they sing back. Fishermen say that the tides are strange near Douarnenez, too swift, too knowing. Compasses misbehave, engines stall. And yet the seafloor shows nothing, no ruins, no walls, no city. But then ease was always more feeling than form. In 2022, a child with no Breton ancestry began humming a tune in her sleep, a song her parents didn't know. When they played her recordings of traditional music, she pointed to a forgotten folk melody from the 1800s and said, "That one." "She sings that one." The girl had never heard it before. When asked who she was, the girl replied, "The lady with the silver crown." There was no explanation. Some dreams are inherited. A linguist studying Breton etymology once found recurring words in old fishing chants, words not used anywhere else in the region. They weren't Latin or Celtic or French. No root. No match. One of the words repeated often was "care is," beautiful eyes. And in each song, a phrase returned, "At ka destroyo," the city will return. But return from where and to whom? Philosophers suggest the tale of ease endures not because it's true, but because it feels true. The idea that something so beautiful, so perfect, could be lost by one mistake. That ruin can come not from war or wrath, but from a whisper, a single key, a choice. It speaks to our fragility and our longing to be forgiven. At low tide, the sea gives glimpses, a stone shaped like a stair, a metallic glint between weeds, bells that toll with no hand to ring them, but then the tide returns, and with it, silence. There's a spot near the edge of the cliffs, just above the old abbey ruins, where the wind always sounds like music. Locals call it La Fenêtre de Dahat, Dahat's window. If you stand there at dusk, some claim you can feel her watching, not cruelly, but with regret. Others say it's just wind through the rocks. Even science, for all its instruments, can't quite measure memory. Ease survives not in evidence, but in residence. In paintings where salt water drips from stained glass, and lullabies sung near harbors, in the hollow ache left by places we never truly had. And so the tale of ease continues, not written in stone, but in water. It flows through generations, pulled by tide and time. It's told in whispers by grandmothers, in sketchbooks by dreamers, and in songs hummed with no source. Ease has become a mirror. To some, it reflects vanity. To others, grief. To many, a hope that even what's lost isn't gone, merely waiting. And if you ever walk the coast alone, and the wind falls still, and the moon lays silver over the waves, you might hear them too. Those faint, solemn bells, calling, not to warn, but to remind that beneath every calm surface, something forgotten waits to rise again, is not vanished, only submerged. So if the story of ease stirred something in you, a memory, a melancholy, a longing you can't quite name, maybe it's because some part of you remembers the sea too, not just as water, but as witness. Thank you for drifting with us tonight here on Mysteries of Old. If this tale brought you peace, wonder, or a moment of quiet, feel free to subscribe, but only if it feels right. And if you're still awake, tell us in the comments. What forgotten place do you think still lingers just beneath the surface? Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams never sink too deep. Good night.